Welcome everyone. Today we are going to implement API Gateway. We've already implemented the service registry in the order API and the product API. If you haven't seen that video, I'll recommend you to watch that video first. I have run order API and product API, and we can see in the console 8500 both the APIs are up. We can see the order service and the product service, they both are registered with the console. Now let's start with the API Gateway implementation. I hope you already know what an API Gateway is. API Gateway is a single point of entry for our multiple microservices. If we have only one microservice, then API Gateway is not a solution. If we have more microservices, then we have a single point of entry. We don't have to implement the authorization, authentication, rate limiting for all of the APIs. Instead, we can do that in the API Gateway. So let's implement it. I'll be using Ocelot API Gateway. It's a third-party library that we will be installing. So let's install the NuGet package first. First install this one Ocelot. Okay, you can see the version here. You can select your project where you want to install it. So I'm installing in the API Gateway. Next, you can install this one, ocelot.provider.console. So we will be using the console in the API Gateway. So that is being used for the service discovery. We will see that how it works. So I'll also be installing this in the API Gateway. So both the packages are installed. Now we need to add the configurations related to the Ocelot. We can add that information in the app setting.json file, or we can create a new file. Let's say ocelot.json. If we create a new file, then we have to add that configuration, or we have to bind that file to the project. We'll see how it's going to be done. The configuration that we need to add, it's available on a website. If you write Ocelot JSON configuration, this is the first link that you will get. You see here the route is the object that tells the Ocelot how to treat an upstream request. We'll see what's upstream request. Global configuration, it's where we will add the configuration related to the service discovery. So we'll be adding here the console we are using for the service discovery, and what's the host of the console as well. So this is how it's going to happen. Let's copy this to configurations. Let's add a new file. Let's call it ocelot.json. Let's create a new file again. We'll add it for the development. Dot development.json. Okay, so here we add this configuration. Now there are routes that we need to add. So we have to add the routes for the order API and the product API. Let's add the global configuration first. If you go to the same website, and if you go a little bit down where you will see the console store configuration, you see we have to add this information. So this is the service discovery provider, and this is the port. So let's copy this one and paste it here. And the host is localhost, so this is where our console is running, right? So, but the port number is 8500. You can see it here. The console is running on localhost 8500. Now we can also mention the type as well. So the type is going to be a console. Okay, so that's all done for the service discovery provider or the global configuration. Now let's add the routes. Well, for the routes there are a lot of configuration that can be added. You can see it here. Downstream path, upstream path. We can mention the methods that are supported. We can also mention the service name, downstream uh, scheme, it's HTTP or HTTPS. This is the host and port. Again, load balancer, rate limiting, that's what we talked about. This is how the API gateway is going to be used. We can implement the authentication. This is the max connections per server we can add. So there are a lot of settings that can be applied. I'll not be adding each and every setting. I'll be just adding the required information that is related to the this API gateway when we send the request for particular API like product or order through API gateway, how it works. I have already copied the required information and pasted in the route object we have in the Ocelot.development.json. Okay, so what's happening here? This is the upstream path template. So this is the path, or this is how the request we are going to get. Okay, this is the downstream path. Downstream path is where the actual the microservice is running. We can see it here. If we go to the get all, okay, if we try this one, we'll execute this one. You see, we have the host, and then we have the API product. So this is how the downstream path that we have to mention. These are the methods: get, put, post, and delete. So currently we have only get for the product API, so we can mention the get. You can mention all four methods, it's up to you. So now let's say in the order API we have 10 methods. Okay, so suppose we are getting the let's say get all. Okay, and then we call the get all. Okay, this is right. So we have a get all method in the order, and the order API, this has the get all method. But let's say if we have 10 or more than 10 methods, how we are going to add? We cannot just copy paste and add each and every method here. It's going to be messy. So instead we can mention everything here. So whatever the request that comes from the order, and then anything after the order we have, it could be a ID, it could be a um, method name. So we can mention everything here, and the same goes here as well. Okay, so that's all for the configuration. We can add for the product as well. So this is going to be product, and the service is product, and let's change it to product as well. Okay, so the service name we have here, it's our order service and the product service. If you go to the console, if you go to the order service and the product service, you can see the name of the services that we have mentioned while registering these services to the console. So we have only one instance here. There could be a couple of more instances. So we have the service name added here. Later we will see how we can use the load balancer as well. So with the service name, it will fetch all the instances that we have, and based on the load balancer, it will make the request to that particular instance. So that's all for the configuration. We can copy the same code and we can paste in the Ocelot.json. So why we have two development, or why we have two configurations? Because in the Ocelot.json will not be running the console on localhost. Console could be running on any server address, but in the local we could have the console running on the local system. So that's why we have two different files. And the environment variable for in my system it's already set to development. So if we add the Ocelot JSON, it will not read it. Yeah, it can read it if we mention that in the program.cs. That's what we are going to do right now. Let's remove this one. Okay, so we have to add the configuration. We have to bind the configuration to the app. So how we can do that? We have the builder here. So let's get the environment variable first. Okay, we have the environment dot get environment variable. We give the name asp dot net core. I think I'll confirm it later. Okay, the file that needs to be read, it's based on the environment variable, right? So we have Ocelot config file name. So if the environment is equal to production, right, then the file would be ocelot.json. Otherwise, the file would be ocelot dot, we have the environment dot json. Okay, so now we have to add this JSON file to the configuration. We have configuration, add JSON file, and we give the name here ocelot.config file. There are some settings that we can apply. You can see here reload on change. You can set it to true. Okay, there is another change optional is false. It's not optional file. Okay, it's a mandatory file that needs to be added. Let's add the ocelot in the service builder.services.add ocelot. Let's mention the configuration that we have added for the builder, and here we have to add the provider. So we are using the console, right? So add console. That's it. So once, okay, let me do this one. Okay, so continue without changes. So this is how we have added the configuration. The Ocelot JSON file, it's going to be added in the Ocelot, and we are using the console as a service discovery. So that's what we have mentioned in the builder.services. One last change that we have to make is we have to define here app dot use ocelot dot wait. I think that's all. This is all we need for the API gateway. Now if we send the request to the API gateway, it will be forward to the order or the product API based on the route that we have mentioned. Okay, so if you go to the launch setting, you can see where our uh, Ocelot or the API gateway is going to be running. Let's run it. Okay, so this is wrong. Ocelot.json was not found, of course. The environment. Oh, okay. We didn't check for the ASP.NET Core environment variable. Let me check what's the actual name. If you go to the properties in the launch setting, you can see the variable name that we have here. Let's copy this one. Let's paste it here. Let's run it again. Let's see. File not found. The configuration file ocelot.development.json was not found, but it's there. Okay. The name we have here, it's wrong. There is no E after development. Okay, I think that's all. Let me run it again. Yeah, it's running on 5165. So that's what we have in the launch settings. Okay, I stopped these services. Let me run it again. Run order API, run product API. Okay, now you know that we have added the path here in the Ocelot development or .json file. So we have the order and then we have everything. Let's start with the product because we have the get method in the product. So the name of the method or the route that we have in the product is get all, right? So this is get all. Okay, now let's try it here. So if we add this product get all, it should work. Have we got any error somewhere in the gateway? Okay, now let's check it. saying the high downstream return this failed to match the path, is not able to API product everything. No, the indication need to forget all. Okay, let me remove this one. Okay, now so it's working. You see, um, we are not directly calling the product API. We are going through the API gateway. So this is how the API gateway can be implemented. We can check for the order API. We can add multiple APIs. It's up to the requirement, right? So this is all for the API gateway. We slowly add more settings to the API gateways. We'll add the circuit breaker policy. We'll add the poly extension. We'll also be looking into the um, transactional or the distributed transactions, how we can manage it using the two-phase commit or as well as the saga pattern. So I hope you watch all the upcoming videos. So I'll see you there in the next videos. If you have any question, any queries related to any of the videos, you can mention in the comments. I'll be adding the URL of this repository in the comments or in the description. You can take the reference from there if you are stuck somewhere, or you can ask in the comments. So that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.